So, today we're going to dive into a legal case that is just so strange. It really makes you ask some big questions about how our justice system is supposed to work. It's a story about a very confusing roadside fight, a huge mistake by a lawyer, and then the battle to fix it all when the process itself just completely breaks down. Let's get into it. I mean, that sounds impossible, right? How could that even happen? But that's the central paradox here, the puzzle we're going to try and untangle. This question came out of a real court case, and the answer, well, it shows a really fascinating and frankly kind of a troubling wrinkle in the whole fabric of the law. And here you have it. In the case of Ashley Ray Jean Higgins, a jury looked at one single incident, one action, and came back with these two verdicts that just completely contradict each other. They said she did not assault or menace someone. But in the very same breath, they said she was guilty of unlawfully using a weapon. So how can both be true? To figure that out, we have to go all the way back to the beginning. Okay, so to even begin to understand that verdict, we've got to start with what actually happened. And like a lot of these cases, it all starts in a moment of really high tension. And as you'll see, with very, very different stories about what went down. So picture this, a roadside in Oregon. A woman named Chelsea Hertz confronts Miss Higgins and her husband. Why? Because she thought they had just stolen her car. She even told the police later that she saw red, which, yeah, that gives you a pretty good idea of the mood at that moment. And here's the absolute mess the jury had to sort through. The story is completely different depending on who's telling it. The victim says she was hit 3 times. Another witness says maybe just once. Then you have the defendant, Miss Higgins, who says, no, I was the one who got hit. Was there a rock? Was it a tree branch? Was the dog attacking, or was it being held back? The police report is just a tangle of contradictions. That makes a jury's job almost impossible. Now, this little detail from the officer's report, it was a huge deal for the defense. Miss Higgins' whole argument was self-defense, and here's the officer noting that there was no physical evidence to back up the other story. So with all these messy facts, the jury comes back with that impossible verdict we saw. But believe it or not, the story doesn't end there. In fact, this is where it takes a really critical turn. Okay, so after the trial, the whole focus shifts. It's no longer about what happened on that roadside. It's about what didn't happen in a lawyer's office. And this is where a huge procedural failure threatens to make that bizarre verdict permanent. 30, that's the number. In Oregon, you have exactly 30 days from sentencing to file a notice of appeal. That's it. It is a hard, strict, totally unforgiving deadline. If you miss it, you could lose your right to have a higher court look at your case, and it doesn't matter how good your arguments are. Let's just walk through this timeline because it's just devastating. May 29th, the sentence comes down. Ms. Higgins immediately tells her lawyer, file the appeal. The clock starts ticking. 30 days later, June 28th, the deadline comes and it goes. Nothing. No appeal was filed. It's only later that Ms. Higgins finds out, files a complaint, and then in August, her lawyer finally admits what happened. Poof, her right to an appeal was just gone. And there it is, right there in black and white. This isn't some he said, she said situation. This is a direct admission from the trial lawyer himself to the Oregon State Bar. He was told to file the appeal, and he just didn't do it. So what does the law call this? Well, it has a name. In the legal world, it's called ineffective assistance of counsel. And this is a huge deal in American law. I mean, think about it. The right to a lawyer doesn't mean much if that lawyer isn't actually competent. So when an attorney's mistake is so bad that it basically forfeits your right to a whole legal process like an appeal, that's seen as a major breakdown in the system. You know, this isn't just a case of bad customer service. This duty is written right into the rulebook for lawyers. Rule 1.3 is super simple and direct. And just forgetting or failing to file an appeal on time, that's probably one of the clearest ways you can violate this rule. So the appeal deadline was missed, the right was seemingly lost. Was that just a dead end? Well, not quite. The legal system actually has ways to try and correct its own mistakes, and this is how that fight gets started. So the case started out in a circuit court, which is the trial court where juries hear all the evidence. The next level up is the Oregon Court of Appeals. Their job is to review what happened in the lower courts and check for legal mistakes. The big challenge, of course, is how to get your case in front of them after the deadline is already passed. And this is the tool for the job. It's called a motion to file a late appeal. Ms. Higgins' new lawyer filed this exact document, spelling out the whole story of her trial lawyer's error, and basically asking the Court of Appeals for an exception to that 30-day rule. It's really just a formal way of asking for a second chance.
Okay, so let's say the appeal is granted. What happens next? Well, the process is actually very structured. First, they type up every single word spoken at the trial into official transcripts. Then the new lawyer goes through that entire record with a fine-tooth comb looking for legal mistakes. After that, they write what's called a brief, which is just a really long legal argument, and then the state responds, and finally, the Court of Appeals makes its decision.
Now here's a key rule that really surprises a lot of people. An appeals court can't bring in new witnesses. They can't look at new evidence. They are locked into what's called the four corners of the record. Think of it like this. Their job isn't to replay the game, it's to review the game tape and see if the referees, the judge and lawyers, applied the rules correctly.
So, if the court grants this late appeal, what arguments are they actually going to hear? Well, it all comes down to two powerful claims that connect everything we've just talked about. This is where they try to finally solve this legal puzzle. The arguments are twofold. First, there's the procedural one, the ineffective assistance of counsel. The lawyer messed up, and that alone is a reason to hear the case. And second, there's the main event, the argument that the verdicts themselves are just legally impossible. They simply cannot exist together under the law.
And this, right here, is the absolute heart of the contradiction. Let's break it down. To find Ms. Higgins not guilty of menacing, the jury had to have decided she did not have an unlawful intent to scare someone, okay? But then, to find her guilty of unlawful use of a weapon for the exact same action, they had to decide she did have an unlawful intent. Do you see the problem? It's a logical impossibility. You can't have and not have the same criminal intent at the exact same time.
So what does that tell us? The only thing that really makes sense is that the jury was just confused. Maybe about the law, maybe about the instructions they were given. And when a jury verdict is the result of that kind of deep misunderstanding, it's considered legally unsound. An appeals court has the power to just throw it out.
And this whole case just brings us back to this massive, fundamental question about our entire justice system. It's not just about what happened on some roadside. It's about whether this whole complicated process of lawyers and rules and deadlines, this system we built to be fair, can actually deliver justice when its own parts start to break down. It really makes you wonder, when the process itself fails, can we ever really trust the outcome?